Hey, good morning, everybody. Monday. Get myself set up a little bit here. Monday, September 14th. And what we're talking about today is public investment. Um, just a reminder, we are 50 days out from the election today, 50 days to go until November 3rd. And don't forget that just like with the primaries this year, we have the opportunity for lots of different ways to vote. So if you haven't yet requested your mail-in ballot, you can request your mail-in ballot by going to votespa.com. Those mail-in ballots originally were scheduled to be mailed out starting today, actually, though there has been a delay. There's a lawsuit happening. It's actually trying to keep Green Party candidates off the ballot, and that's delayed. Oh, sorry, music. We don't want that music again. So anyway, that's put a little bit of delay in it. They're saying it'll be end of September, potentially early October before those ballots are actually mailed to you. So keep that in mind. There's also a new provision that I haven't heard very much about, but I've learned a little bit, is that early voting is actually now a thing in Pennsylvania, in that you can go, once the ballots are out, you can go to your county elections board and request a mail in ballot live while you're there and actually fill out the ballot in person. One stop shop while you're at the elections board, and you can do that as soon as the ballots are out. So there's a couple of different opportunities to vote up until November 3rd. And so that's coming up pretty fast. So today, though, I want to talk about public investment. Public investment is a term, and I want to focus in particular today on thinking about the word investment in public investment, and the idea that, as with all investments, what you're trying to do is put money into something that will reap better rewards as you move forward. And so there's a couple of different pejoratives that you might hear some people talk about. So instead of investment, they might talk about spending. And I would accent this is one of the places where you see quite a bit of contrast between me and my opponent, Brad Roy, is that he's often talking about, well, he literally says that Pennsylvania has a spending problem, not an undertaxing problem. And so he would probably voice it as public spending instead of investment. But I think we don't want to think about the term of just spending, because that suggests we're just going out on a spree and we don't get anything for it. And of course, what we need to talk about, and we will at the end if we have time, is that we are in some way talking about taxes, but we are talking then about how taxes are being spent. Now, today, the point is that public investment is a very good thing for us. And so I want to start with a really good example of a strong public investment, and then what that strong public investment actually faces as an obstacle for some who want to actually cut the investment in some way. So I'm going to draw this loaf of bread here. It's not a loaf of bread, as you might guess. Put the wheels on here, right, as they go round and round. And what we're talking about is the bus. And we can talk in particular about the Crawford Area Transit Authority, the rural busing. And of course, we also have an Erie busing system. Now, the Erie busing system, in a certain way, is a little bit easier to think about. And so I want to accent the rural issue of buses. So right now, if we think about CATA, or what we know about CATA, is it's actually a $4.2 million operation. And there are 80 individuals in Crawford and Venango County who work for CATA. And CATA has actually been a phenomenally successful public transit system. Most of, or a large portion of their budget, comes from state appropriation. And some of that comes from federal dollars as well. And that's why the fare, the regular fare for a trip, is $1.25 each way to ride the bus, which is a pretty good deal. And a stat that I'm always putting up that we want to think about mattering is that in a place like Meadville, where we have 24% poverty, or Crawford County in general, where we have 13% poverty, it's really important that we, sorry, I'm going to move the camera there a little bit so you can see the edge of that. It's really important that we make a public investment in something like public transport. But we face a moment in the summer of 2021, so next summer, CATA and other rural transit in particular are facing a storm. And part of that storm is a fiscal cliff. And that fiscal cliff is related to this main portion of their business, the regular routes that they drive, is that right now there are $450 million annually from the turnpike. So these are turnpike tolls are allocated specifically for public transportation in the Commonwealth. About 90% of that public transportation money goes to urban transportation systems. So about 10% of that $45 million is spread out around the various rural transit systems. Well, a law has been passed, and so in summer of 2021, um, if nothing changes, those $450 million that have been earmarked for public transportation are just going to fold into the general fund. And that's a public disinvestment. That's thinking about cutting spending in certain ways. So those $450 million would be doled out in different ways. And what that means is that that rate's going to have to go up. And so that adversely affects the 24% people that are living in poverty, 13% people living in poverty across the county, and then all sorts of public transit riders in the Commonwealth. As bad or almost as bad, there's another situation, and that has to do with the other part of CATA's business is the smaller buses, which are a shared ride situation. And those shared rides are if people need to go to a doctor's appointment, there are particularly discounted rates for people on Medicaid, Medicare, and also individuals with disabilities. And this is sort of like using CATA bus as a taxi or an Uber. It's point-to-point service, picking up at your house, taking to your doctor's appointment. And so often a trip here is only costing $2 to $7. Well, again, in summer of 2021, there's been a bill that has been passed that is going to privatize that shared service. And privatize, of course, is the big opposite of public investment. And the way that privatization would work in this case is it would set up several private brokerage regions in the Commonwealth that would then bid out the services for that point-to-point transport. What studies have shown us is that everywhere that has happened, the service has declined because the private brokers, to make a profit, are actually disincentivized from offering rides because they get paid in a different way than right now. Instead of straight out of a fare, there are per person or per capita incentives. And so it gets more expensive and the service goes down. That's the problem of thinking public investment is bad. Yeah, sure, you can cut spending that way. You can take some of the dollars off of the ledger. It becomes privatized, but we actually see a worse outcome for us. So that's a good example, and it's right here at home, and it's not something we necessarily think about. And I mean, again, it's September, so we have to think about distinctions. Public investment, transportation in particular, is a pretty big difference between me and the other guy. So broadly, when we're talking about public investment, we're talking about things like infrastructure. Obviously, infrastructure matters to us. Those are the roads that we drive on, and we all experience the potholes and things like that. We need public investment to keep them up and repair them. It's the bridges that we use. How about, I'm going to try to draw a modem. Can I draw a modem? It's going to look like a flat TV or a robot head. Broadband, I'm going to write it down here. Broadband is a potential public investment in infrastructure, where if we put the money into broadband, understanding that it's for the public good, it's something that can help all of us. Education is another public investment. I think you get the drift here. You understand what I'm talking about. The last one I want to put up here in general is innovation. And this would be places where we would have government grants for R&D, or broadly to think about green development, something that's really important. I'm going to come back to this green development. We clearly need a green pen to think about green development. And this could also be in agricultural development, innovation, and how we can help our farmers. What people don't often talk about with public investment is that its return is extremely positive. Public investment has a plus 15% to plus 45% impact on private productivity. So let me slow down for a second there, and just to say that putting a dollar, $100, whatever, into a public investment has a 15% increase to 45% increase on the productivity of the private sector. So investing in the bus, for example, can help private companies because now employees can actually get to work. And you can see these cascading effects with this sort of investment, and why it's so important that we invest our tax dollars in the public is that if somebody can get to work, then they're less likely to need other government services. And so we can cut the costs in food stamps, for example, because they don't need the food stamps anymore. Public investment has a tremendous return. And in general, we see that studies suggest that private investment is not as effective. Public investment has a higher rate of return most of the time than private investment. So public investment is reaping tremendous benefits. So why do we often hear this as a point of contention? Because it's all about this ideological separation between the public and the private, and the idea that in some way competition is what we need for everything. When I think about some of the public investments that we have, what I think we need to understand is that this is actually a falsehood, is that the concept of competition isn't really holding true in a lot of the areas where we would need or put public investment. One of the places where I'd love to see more would be healthcare, for example. And I'll talk more probably in a longer evening address about healthcare, which is the plank of my platform. But when you think about competition in healthcare, and when those say that, well, we just need to open this up for more competition, to have a truly competitive marketplace, all individuals need to have the opportunity to say, no, that's too much, to actually opt out. The competition can work in that sense if you're able to say, no, that's too much. I'm not going to buy that product or service. And that works really fine for, say, a supercar. That if you're shopping around for supercars, you can say, no, that's too much. I don't need a supercar. It works a lot less well when we're talking about your personal health, because the opt out is something that, well, you die in the case of healthcare. And so public investment can step in these places where we absolutely need the roads, the bridges, the broadband, the green development, the bus service, the healthcare. And so when we throw everything into that investment mentality, we have a problem. I'm going to move the coffee here so I have one more corner. The last example that I want to mention with this is this idea of green development. And sort of a quick story to that. One of the hot button issues right now in Harrisburg is the RGGI, which is the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. And so the governor wants to, and says he is, enrolling the Commonwealth in it, and the majority in power right now in the legislature says they don't want to. Now, the RGGI, or the RGGI, has proven to be quite effective in other states in lowering greenhouse gas emissions, which is a good thing. But there's another way of thinking about this that's really important. And it starts with the view from my family farm down in Indiana County. On the horizon, one of the things that you can see is a coal-fired generating station, right? And these are the stacks. And that coal-fired generating station, in fairness to it, has gotten a lot cleaner throughout my lifetime, but still, it's one of the more polluting greenhouse gas and actually mercury toxin um, power plants in the country. And my county has 3 coal-fired plants, which you can imagine has an impact on air quality and other things. Now, with the RGGI, we would clearly hasten the window of when we would be moving away from coal as an energy producer. And that's been happening already, in fact. And there's a state senator down there who said, hey, we know we only have 10 years left, but I don't want the Reggie because that might make it 5. And I'd rather have 10 years than 5. And my point to that is development. 10 years versus 5 years is not a big deal if you're not developing anything in the meantime. So you just get to limp along with a lack of public investment for 5 extra years and then everything collapses. There's an organization that's called Reimagine Appalachia, and they have really interesting things to say about economic development and thinking about the broad Ohio Valley. And we can kind of, even though we're not in the Ohio Valley, we can be included broadly in it. So that's Pittsburgh coming up through Youngstown, the border between Ohio and Pennsylvania. And their point, and one of the key points, they have a lot of points, they're really worth checking out. One of their points is that green development will happen. There's no avoiding it. And so even if you don't like green development, you have to accept the reality that there is going to be, at some point in the relatively near future, a significant federal investment in green development, probably for the energy sector. And basically, if we don't say that we're interested in that public investment, we're going to get left out of the conversation. And the investments are going to go elsewhere, and we will continue to limp along for the last few years of the old economy and then collapse further. And so when we reimagine and demand that we have a seat at the table and recognize that our investments in the public reap benefits for us, whether it's getting to work or increasing or creating a new industry for people to work in, we have a strong return on that investment. Taxes, right? I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about all of that right now because we're getting up near the end and you need to drink your coffee and I need to drink my coffee. But the point is, when you have politicians who run over and over again on a concept that all taxes are bad, and they proudly campaign on the fact that they oppose public investment, what you see is that you're never going to have public development. We are one of the regions in the Commonwealth that most requires investment. We see that investment happening elsewhere. And there are different ways we can think about our taxation system in Pennsylvania. There, in fact, is a plan for a fair taxation system that would lower the taxes for about half of Pennsylvanians, leave it the same for another 30-35%, and only a small percentage of very high wage earners would see a small increase in their taxes that would generate several $billions more in public money for public investment. And that can be a way to create more fairness. We're suffering this over here because of a lack of public investment. We need to think about how public investment could actually help us do better in the world. All right, I think that is what I have for the morning. I'm Matt Ference. It's been Monday Mornings with Matt, September 14th. Thanks for coming in. Hope you have a great cup of coffee. Have a great day. Autumn is upon us. September is a wonderful month. My birthday happens to be in September, so I like it quite a bit. Have a good one. See you later.